Hello and welcome to Senior Moment. My name is David Reffsin. I'm your host for the show. Senior Moment is for seniors and by seniors. I am very pleased to have as my guest Jim Lescault. He's the Executive Director of Amherst Media. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about you and the fact that you're 13th year as Executive Director, is that right?
Yeah, a lot of people can't believe that, including myself. But
so how did you get from there to here? How did that go?
Well, that was a long process. I mean, now that I finally joined the Senior Moment, being 66,
Wow.
you really get your card and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Holyoke and, blue-collar family. But, sports got us into college, and you did the usual things. But I dropped out of college early on and went back, and I started learning video technology back in the mid-'70s, which was very early for it to get out into the non-network world. And I was working with a company out of East Longmeadow, and I learned on-the-job training. But then I quickly said, industrial films are not my field. I really wanted to be with people. So I got away from that, and I went to Holyoke, and I volunteered with young people, and I started showing them how to make their own videotapes back in '77.
That was a lot new back then, I would assume.
Yeah, the equipment was reel-to-reel,
Right.
and what was called porta-packs, but I worked in the inner city and got a chance to really meet a lot of wonderful people. Jump ahead from that, I became more involved in politics in the local urban setting of Holyoke, which had a huge arson problem. It had police issues. We had all sorts of housing issues for sure. And so for about 4 years, I was really very active in the community and helping organize the community, and got involved with a bunch of lawsuits, like a housing lawsuit, which was a federal lawsuit we won. And also we got dragged into a desegregation lawsuit. The community didn't want to knock down the neighborhood building. The mayor did at the time, and we went that way. But jumping forward, I went back to school, got my degree in UMass in community planning when I was in my 30s, and while there, became a director of a national firm that dealt with arson for profit, the prevention of arson for profit, if you will. And that took me around, and I cut my teeth nationally. And, I loved that kind of interaction with policy and staying true to what the needs of the community were.
Sure.
So before coming here, I was running a program for the Holyoke School Department called Even Start. It was a family literacy program. It was a national program. At night with families coming in, and we had computer labs we built and whatnot for about 5 years.
Wow.
And it got defunded by the Bush administration for one of our many wars. So I was unemployed for about a month when someone called me who lived in Amherst, said, I know you probably aren't interested in this, but there's an opening at Amherst Media, at that time called Amherst Community Television. Right. So I applied, and they decided to hire me, and that was in 2007.
Well, aren't we lucky to have you as Executive Director here for all these years? I'm glad you stayed.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about the cable business and how it's changed over time. Can you talk a little bit about that, how it went from Center for Community Access TV, later Amherst Community TV, etc.? Things have changed.
Yeah. Community access centers kind of evolved out of the mid-'70s when the cable companies started arriving into these towns and cities and people were very fearful of losing local news, losing local control. So a lot of pressure was put on the Federal Communication Commission and others saying, look, the locals need a say. And so what they came up with eventually was the ability to negotiate with these cable companies coming in for the use of the poles and the roadways. You got in return up to 5% of the revenue off of cable if you wanted, up to 3 channels if you wanted. So it's still left as a local decision and a negotiable issue, right? And so Amherst was one of the very first to go for the grants back in the mid-'70s, 76, and get one channel. And it had no funding. It just started with volunteers and getting a little bit of money for equipment. And you have to respect the fact that the community saw the need for transparency of government. There was, a lot of motion to get social justice into the hands of people that were making their own news for the first time. And so that was the beginning of this. When I came on in 2007, it had gone through many changes, not only names, but also locations.
Talk a little bit about that, about the various locations that you see that was going on.
Sure. I just recently talked to Irene Starr, who had been a volunteer back in the 70s into the 80s. And again, there was no paid staff. And they were over renting over on Grove Street, which is where North Fire studios are right now, audio studios are now. And she said it was terrible because the college students didn't have cars. They couldn't walk over necessarily. Young people weren't comfortable walking over, so it was a transportation problem. And the cost of the factory was very expensive. So she lobbied and got them to move over to North Pleasant Street in a small business I forget the actual address. I think it's 358 North Pleasant.
Yeah.
358 North Pleasant. They were there for quite a while, but while there, they tried to build out or get into the Bain Center. They tried to get Jones Library to consider them when they were going through a renovation. They looked at the post office when the University Drive was going to build a brand new post office. So all those things were looked at, right? And it wasn't until '91 when this building, when Western Mass Electric, owned by Northeast Utilities, built a new location in Route 9 in Hadley, that this opened up, and the people got together and really worked hard to get us in here. And we've been here since '91.
Why did you lose your lease?
You make it sound like we did something wrong.
No, not at all. I had a feeling it was them. I have no doubt that it was.
Yeah. What happened was, you have to remember, Northeast Utilities and Eversource were in the negotiations for a merger at this time in 2010, 2011. And all of a sudden they said, we're not going to renew your long-term lease. And we're like, why not? And they just said that because. And so what we found out many years later was that they were hoping to knock this building down, build another footprint to provide more of the electricity UMass was going to need with the expected build-out. And since 2011, we've had probably 8 new buildings over there, right? And UMass decided to provide some of their own power. So they didn't need to do that here. It wasn't going to be needed. So even though there was no need for the building, they still said, we like it when Eversource finally merged, they said, we still like you out. So we've been negotiating year to year, and that started us looking. I've been looking for 8 years to try to relocate us.
Fortunately, they've allowed you to, I guess you want to call it month to month or whatever it is, to extend your lease at this point.
Yeah, and I got to thank a lot of political people and just maneuvering, but also they raised our rent a few times, thinking we were just staying here on that reason, but their understanding when we finally bought the property and moved forward.
Speaking of that, tell me about your decision to purchase the property on Main and Gray. Was there criteria used when looking into this? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I personally started looking and looked at over 25 properties being already built that needed rehab or moved in or something. And early on, the board of directors here made a list of criteria saying, what is it that we're looking for? What is our needs, right? Criteria needs. And what we wanted was to be as close to downtown as possible. 2 was to be on a bus line. We're not even on a bus line. Since 1991, we're not on a bus line over here. 3 was, if possible, to be close to the schools so that the after-school programming could be better attended, that we could do more, because the transportation is always an issue where children live, a good distance around town. Those were the primary, and we wanted sustainability. If we owned our own building, could that help us in the future finally stay somewhere, be located there, and work towards a future in that site? So
in 2013, you decided to make a purchase.
Yeah, what we looked at was the property over on Main and Gray Street. This was an interesting lot that had been bought back in mid-2000s by Barry Roberts and the University Drive LLC. It was the old Hills House, which was the boys' club at the time that had just moved out. It was one parcel, the whole thing. It was quite a few acres.
I was going to say, it was quite a big parcel of land.
Sure. And they subdivided into 6 parcels. And with that, they started moving, relocating historical buildings on that site and then rehabbing them. So one from Kendrick Park, one was from Amherst College. They got moved over and rehabilitated. But they were breaking up that big, huge parcel. We came along, and there was 2 parcels left fronting Main and Main and Gray Street. And we were negotiating with Jerry Cadero, who was an agent for his mother's trust, the family trust that owned the front property. And that was when we realized that we wanted it to be a neighborhood business zoning. And so we went before purchasing it to town meeting and got town meeting to vote to change the zoning to neighborhood business, which everyone said no one's ever gotten that through on one time, first time through. And that we felt was the beginning. Jerry wanted to be the developer. It didn't work out because he wasn't bringing money to the table, and we had some differences.
So the town eventually said yes to rezoning?
Oh yeah, they voted. The whole town meeting voted it to be neighborhood business.
Okay. What was the status of the Hills property prior to you folks purchasing the land that you did?
Well, as I said, it was broken up into those 6 parcels, but more importantly is our funding of $340,000 for those 2 parcels, which we felt was a decent price given its location, never been built on, was enabled Mrs. Gadara, the trust, to buy 14 Gray Street from her son, Jerry Gadara, allowing him some free up cash to go up to the Hills House and start renovating the Hills House. So we invested in the historic district, which only became the historic district in 2012.
And was it that because of the 2 houses that got moved to that property there?
Well, I think that was part of it. Plus, you have the Emily Dickinson Museum, you have the Women's Club, which is also another Hills family house. So I think, and Jerry Gadara was one of the volunteers to form this new district.
And it would seem to me that Amherst Media is part of history in this town, so it would fit in very well, given the historical properties, that there be something like you folks there, since you've been around for, what is it, 45 years now or so?
Yeah, 44.
44. Yeah. So it seems like it would fit into this historic nature of the surrounding, you got the Women's Club and Emily Dickinson and 2 historic houses. Seems like it fit in quite well there. I've been told that Amherst Media purchased the parcel without a survey. Is that really true?
Yeah, if I was to regret one thing, is the board and myself trusted the seller, and there was friends of the seller on our board who said, he said it's surveyed recently, that the boundaries are all set. Our fault, yes, but at the same time, it's led to us needing to go to court with Jerry Gadara for fraudulent presentation of the property sold to us. People seemed a little confused by that, but we did win in Superior Court on that decision.
Okay, that is good to know. So it was known to the prospective buyers of Hill House, Gray Street. It was known about all of this. Obviously, they knew all of this, correct?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Spicer and Brackett are the 2 owners of what was called 38 Gray Street now, the Hills House. Right. They actually sat in land court in Boston, watched the whole proceedings. They sat with us and talked and tried to buy some. He wanted Jerry to have us sell some of the frontage as an easement. And we kept saying, we can't do that. We don't have our engineering reports in. So if we did that, we might find out we don't have enough space. Right. So we got a lot of pressure to try to do that because they wanted that vista all the way down the main street for their building. We can understand that. But they did not go blindly into purchasing for 1.5 or 1.3, whatever it was, the house. They knew that we had plans to build, that we were down at the bottom of the hill.
So there was some complaints about your design. Initially, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, you did have a survey done, obviously.
Oh, the survey proved that the original lines from even when Barry Roberts and them did it was confirmed.
So what were some of the complaints about your proposed designs that were an obstacle here, at least at the beginning?
Well, we were, if you know the location, the hill goes up Main Street to downtown. That's the west side, okay, of the hill. That's the west of our parcel. We needed, because of the water, part of the remediation need is the water piping was tied into for the reconstruction of the Hills House. Piping of the runoffs down to a central pipe was dumping the water onto our property. So that was proven that you can't do that. You don't have an easement to our property for water. And then on the other part of our northern boundary was a wall, a shed, plantings, and part of a driveway that was on our property. So those are we needed to figure out how to build the building with the amount of water that was being thrown at. So we had to move from the original thought was to build on the corner. We had to go up the hill more, all right? And they really rejected that idea because then you are kind of in front of the Hills House more than we were when we were on the corner. So we went out with that proposal, and they didn't like the Barnyard was the group that we brought in, very beautiful timber frame buildings that they built, and they rejected, the community rejected it. And when I say that, those that came out vocally against us, saying it was ugly, it was this and that. And we listened to the Historic Commission, and then we also took it to planning, and they were very helpful. And we went back and we said, okay, let's get the architectural firm that can help us walk this through. And we got the Gillen Collaboratives and the Butter across the street, and also one of the designers of the historic district. He was one of the people that helped create it. And Bill Gillen and his associates have worked with us to meet the criteria that they keep asking us for. And we did move the building all the way to the east as far as we can. And we did rearrange and we did change sizes. And we're at that point where we feel very confident that we've played by the regulations, we've listened to the community, and what it separated was those that said no to us on the west side, go back to the corner, to those that are saying no to the west side who are saying no to the corner too. So there's fewer people at the moment vocally yelling at us, right? But you wonder what's the quiet, what is really there. But we feel that we've gone around to the community, we've had community meetings, and a lot of people said, we love this design Bill's done. It fits the community, it reflects the community. What's the problem?
I was going to ask the same question. What's the problem? Just as a quick aside, just taking a step back.
Sure.
I assume the houses are all town water, town sewer over there?
Yes.
So you don't have to do any of that other than hook up to... So what's the problem? It sounds like the Historic Commission is seeing changes in a favorable light to some extent. What's going on?
I don't want to speak for people. I think some of the Historic Commission, this is the first new building they've had to deal with in the Historic District. So it's getting their feet under themselves and understanding. And I get that. We've been very forthcoming with meeting all of their requests, quite honestly. And we understand. But I was getting nervous, and I said, let's ask for a request for all records. So I sent the request for all records to the Planning Department. So we're seeing what's the communication happening around our property, around their concerns. And of course, with open meeting, you cannot have multiple commissioners speaking at the same time or meeting. So there's only a few at a time. But we found in the records a number of them, of the commissioners saying, is there a law that we can use to stop anyone from ever building here? So that started to tip us off that, wait a minute, you're not just asking us to fix things and make this, you're looking for a way to stopping us completely that has nothing to do with the architectural integrity of the building that we're proposing. So that worried us, and we're approaching that. We're still going forward. But the other issue is, there's been a lot of delay on the remediations that we talked about. When they Spicer and Brackett bought the house from Jerry Cadera, the Hills house, they put $74,000 aside for remediation from the sale. So that money's sitting there with their lawyer, Matt Massengill, sitting on as a fiduciary of that money to remedy the water, the shed, and all that things. And they took out a permit over almost a year ago, for the trenching and everything, but never moved forward. And we're saying, why aren't you taking care? You're on our property. Basically, get off our property.
Right.
And it's getting very confusing right now because of, do they need to go in front of the local historic district because they're relocating a wall? Well, that's all their problem, quite honestly.
Sure.
Get off our property, deal with what you need to deal with. We've been really very nice, and maybe too nice to this point. But we want to move forward, and we can't keep letting this delay thing because they know that we're a poor nonprofit that's going to eventually have to collapse, right, under the pressure.
Which hopefully you're not going to do, of what the value of this access TV is to the town, which I think is pretty great. You talked about the Historic Commission, and part of what I think may be happening, you kind of alluded to it, is that nobody has really tried, at least recently anyway, to have something built in a historic commission areas there. So this is kind of new to them. And I think they're probably a little nervous. What happens if they open the door to you? Where else is that going to lead to? And I think that there's probably a little bit of concern on their part, which I don't know that it's legitimate or not, but I think that there's maybe a little bit of concern there.
It's a good point, but there's so little land left in the Dickinson Historic District. There's multiple districts in town. I think there's 11. I don't even know the names of all of them. But in this particular one, majority of them are very few houses. If you go up Main Street, you have businesses on one side. They're not, yeah, they're just in the district, all the way up to the police stations in the district.
Right.
Then you come down the other side, you have a park, you have Emily Dickinson's, the Evergreens, the
Sure.
Dickinson's Museum, then the Women's Club, the Hills House, and then you come down Gray, and that's it. So it's not a huge, so in this sense, we're the last property really there unless someone comes in and try to sub-zone, parcel out the Women's Club, which probably won't get off the ground, right? So it really is a look at, can you justify the fact that you, as a town, voted to give business the right to build there?
Right.
And you did. Can you now, as a town, deny a business, one that has served you for 44 years, or do you want that agency, Amherst Media, to sell the property to someone that you don't know? Is that what you really are trying to do? There was an attempt by Brackett and Spicer and others to buy us out at $260,000. And we're like that. We paid $340 plus reinvested money. And they said, well, you paid too much. So we went and had it appraised by a legal appraiser, not by two people telling. And they put it in the paper that it was only worth $260,000. They did an opinion. They got a front page story, and we had it appraised at $345 just a couple months ago. So no, we're not going to take a loss
of course not.
to get rid of us. And then where do we go? We're still on a lease problem here, extended lease with the Eversource.
Right.
Where do we go? Well, people said go to the schools. Well, you just don't show up at a school and move
hi,
in.
here we
Yeah,
are.
hi. We started some Plan B discussions with the school in case this blows up in our face and goes into a long, protracted legal case, which it could. You know, you're denying our economic ability to survive.
It's hard for me to understand, since you brought up the idea that, Amherst Media has served this town for almost 45 years now. It seems like, to me, one of the gems of the town. You've provided so much in the way of politics, people like myself doing shows like this, and it's been going on a long time. So part of my question is, before you get into anything else, is, are enough people really aware of both what's going on, and have they shown positiveness to what you're doing here? I mean, are you getting a lot of feedback from the community?
Well, first of all,
forget about the town and what they're doing. I'm talking
the
folks
people
who live here.
Well, first of all, thank you, David, for you coming and others coming to do shows and wanting to bring in other people in dialogue and meeting different people. That's to us what the basis of what we do. So thank you and all the other producers that come out. This town is made up of people for 44 years who have either been a producer here, a camera person here, a volunteer here, or have been on the board of directors here, or have been on a show, or have definitely been watching the politics either behind the camera or at home, okay? It's into the thousands of people that it's impacted. And what we're looking at is that I've been just pulling together our archives and realizing the names that keep popping up, the people that go back who are still here. So as we do an appeal, people are quietly and not so quietly telling us they're really upset at the Historic Commission and how they're handling us and what's going on. And they're starting to address it to the town manager and to the president of the council that this is not right. And so it's becoming an issue, okay? It is, and with this show, hopefully giving that ability to pull it together a little bit, because it's been going for a number of years, will help people understand a little bit better. Yes, do we get calls? Yes, do we get emails? We're with you. What can I do? Well, it's going to come pretty soon. We're going to know what people can do other than just be aware of the situation and express the need. I mean, I think this is a great location for us. For all the criteria that we mentioned, the schools, the bus stop, the downtown, and we're at the very beginning of the Central Cultural District. We would be you come up Main Street, and here you are, welcome to, and here's an organization with all the archives for 45 years of the town. And here we are trying to train people and keep talking with Jane Wald over at the Emily Dickinson, there's a lot of things, being closer, we'd be able to do with people like her and like the organization.
Well, you just kind of, sort of, to me, hit the nail on the head. This is where you're looking to build a cultural district.
Yeah.
And you have all these wonderful cultural things here. And I think you are not only part of it, but should be part of it, because it fits right into that whole district there. And it would be a great asset for the town and the people who come to visit here. I mean, we have a lot of visitors who go to Emily Dickinson's and so on and so forth, and it seems to me that would fit in rather well.
Well, one of the proposals was for like a rotunda in our middle of our two buildings, because we have to, and it's for the art walk, because we would be the continuation of the art walk
Right.
down Main Street, which goes all the way down to the Jewish Community Center.
Right.
And we were a part of the art walk here when it first started. I used to interview one of the artists here at the end of the art walk, and people would show up for cheese and soda, and then but we had to stop doing it because people said, "Oh, it's too far to walk." Well, over there would be this perfect continuation.
Perfect.
And yes, I totally get it. There's concern, but they're now starting to talk about that we're destroying a viewscape. I'll be honest with you. Look closely at our new drawings. You have to drive up Main Street, get past where our stakes are before you even can see the Hills House now.
Right.
So our house will not be in any way obstructive of the Hills House view. You cannot see the Wingman's Club from our lot because of trees. You cannot see Emily Dickinson's house because of trees. It is not destroying an existing vista.
I think it's only going to add, because you're looking architecturally to do something that's really in sync with what's going on.
Exactly.
Before we kind of end here, what do you see as the next steps for Amherst Media?
Sure, we're going to be going back in October 15th. We don't know where yet, the place to be determined, with our Gillen collaboratives, with a redesign yet again. And we expect at this point that it's pretty much, it should be acceptable at this level to pass this on to the planning board.
Would it be helpful also to kind of let the community out there know that maybe they want to attend this and voice their positive opinion about what's going on? Yeah. I think that would go a long way to maybe make the planning board have a favorable recommendation. I know sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, sometimes they have their mind made up. But it seems like this is such a valuable asset to this town that not to have community input to say, hey, we want this for our town because how valuable not only now, but how it's been in the past.
I think that's exactly what we need, and I'm hoping that people do stand up and start sending the emails, sending the phone calls, and talking to the elected officials.
Jim, it's been a real pleasure.
David,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amherst Media, for helping produce this show, and hope to see you again next time. Thank you.